I'm Michael Primrose, and this is the Property Finance Podcast. If you have an interest in growing your property portfolio, have experience in development, or you're just looking at starting out, then this could be the podcast for you. We talk about all things property finance, we look at products, strategy, and more. So keep listening and check out some of our other episodes to make sure that you're up to date with all things property finance. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Property Finance Podcast, and today I want to talk about 5 deals that went wrong and how we fixed them. So I've got 5 deals here. I'm going to keep it really short. What we'll do is we'll talk through the 5 deals, and then in future episodes, what I'll do is I will expand on each one and maybe even get the developer in to do an interview as well. So the first deal, I'm going to call it valuation shortfall. So in this deal, the valuation came back 400 grand light, massive issue. However, the way that we then looked at it and solved it, and this is working in conjunction with the developer, and this is where we go above and beyond the usual deals, is essentially recutting up the scheme, going back in for amended planning, so more units, smaller units, better GDV, and essentially by completely restructuring actually the first part of the deal, i.e. what's actually being built, we were then able to restructure all of the finance to make it more appealing and essentially get rid of that 400 grand shortfall. So although that valuation came in 400 grand light, it wasn't the end of the day, thank God. We managed to do that recut, represent it, new appraisals, new agent comparables, and the scheme then went through without any issues. So the big lesson with obviously if valuations do have a shortfall is kind of don't fight reality. Like it is, the market is tough at the moment. It's a case of reshaping the scheme, understanding what the market today needs, or the market in 18 months needs potentially, and kind of reshaping that reality to be like, right, okay, 4 or 5 bed houses don't work. I'm instead going to do a scheme of smaller houses because the market needs that. There's more exits. Actually, I can fit, rather than 5 4-bed houses, I can fit 12 semi-detached houses, and actually that still works. So it's about reshaping that scheme and then kind of going back to the lender with a much better plan. So that was the first one. The second one is the contractor going bust. So I've actually had a few of these, to be fair. So by the contractor going bust, the biggest thing that you have is not actually the contractor going bust, but it's the program slipping away. So everything gets delayed. Obviously, you're paying interest on a daily basis on that money that you've borrowed. And that's not just the development finance. It's obviously the equity that you're borrowing to put into the deal. It's mezzanine finance, all that kind of thing. It's also the cost of missed opportunity as well, because the longer those properties take to be built, the longer it takes for them to sell, the longer it takes for you to release your profit, the longer it takes for you then to be able to redeploy those funds. So it's the cost of lost opportunity as well. So the couple of times we've had this, what's happened is we've been able to essentially work with the developer. We've either been able to bring in professionals who've been able to help. So I've referred in a few good QSs, a few good project managers who've been able to come in, split up the packages, and essentially have then been able to tender each of the individual packages out and have then been able to go and get fixed prices on each individual package as opposed to the package as a whole. And what that's done is that's enabled them to keep the prices down, because one of the big things if a contractor goes bust as well is if you bring in another main contractor, what you tend to find is that contractor is going to charge a premium for essentially like taking on someone else's work. So by splitting down the packages, it just means that you can kind of keep that cost where you want it. So the big lesson there is kind of procurement really does rule everything. So if you do have some sort of issue there with contractors, having a good, strong procurement strategy with a QS or maybe even a project manager can really help save the day on that stuff. So the third one I want to talk about, and actually weirdly this is coming up more and more often, is planning conditions being missed. And we've had this twice recently. So essentially the developer started work without ticking off all the pre-commencements. It didn't get picked up by the lender, the lawyers, anything like that. However, it was picked up post-completion of the development finance and essentially kind of once they'd already started works. So essentially the problem is unlawful start. The lender starts getting jittery because you've essentially failed to tick off a pre-commencement. So what happens is, or what happened in this scenario was, works were paused. We then managed to work with a good planning consultant and a good architect, managed to get that condition sort of, because of the circumstances, kind of pushed through a little bit quicker than you normally would have. And by being able to do that, kind of working with the council, everything else, kind of got the lender back on board. But the big thing, the big lesson that came out of this was that a condition tracker is an absolute necessity. And actually the lender on this case now has imposed that as a necessity on all of their cases. So every single deal now that we see with this lender and other lenders, they will insist on a condition tracker whereby all the pre-commencements are listed out, and essentially there is a spreadsheet that tracks, have they all been done, where are they at, etc. So it could have gone really quite badly, but by getting the professionals in place, by getting the spreadsheet sorted, everything else, we managed to get it back on track. And thank God we only lost, I think, a couple of weeks on that one. But yeah, could have been much worse. But it is something that is coming up more regularly. But hopefully with all of these lenders imposing condition trackers, hopefully we're going to see that less now. The fourth one, so rather than the contractor going bust, it's suppliers going bust. So a lot of developers now have kind of a key supplier that they work with. So we had this on one recently. Their supplier went bust and essentially they were stuck because this supplier was so far ahead of everyone else. However, by sitting down, again, getting a good QS on board, putting everything together and sort of redistributing out to a series of suppliers and adding into those suppliers a kind of dangled carrot of, well, if you do something on this one, there's X, Y, Z other sites available. It was a case that actually we were able to get a supplier. It wasn't cheaper, unfortunately, but pretty close to what we had previously. It did mean a redeployment of the contingency. So the contingency that was on the development finance, unfortunately, some of that did have to be assigned to essentially covering the difference in materials. But it solved the issue. They weren't left in a massive, massive hole. And we were able to kind of negotiate a bit of an extension from the lender as well to kind of deal with that transition period as well. So the big lesson for developers and in fact actually us and lenders as well is always having kind of a B list of suppliers. So it's always a thing of one of the most successful developers I know has, I think it's 4 suppliers who regularly come out to the site. And he will distribute between these 4. So not one supplier gets 100% of everything. So each supplier is constantly kind of against each other, if you like, competing for the business. But he will split everything kind of equally between the 4. So they all feel like they're getting business, but it does keep costs down quite aggressively as well. So absolutely, that's how I would do it. And then the last one is kind of a sales gap, if you like. So again, we've got this on a couple at the moment, but the one specific one is that reservations have really slowed. They're big houses in an area that doesn't really have a massive demand for big houses at the moment. There's a rival scheme that's undercutting in terms of pricing, which is a big thing at the moment actually as well, is people developing in areas and then bigger developers kind of developing around them and then undercutting. So that is one thing. If you are getting into a smaller site, which is kind of surrounded by potentially a bigger site, be aware that you are going to get undercut because obviously they have bigger margins and can shave far more off than you can. The way that we have kind of dealt with it now is kind of having micro incentives. So things like we'll cover your stamp duty for you, or potentially dropping the price slightly, or paying for certain elements in the house. So for example, covering flooring, covering a kitchen, having maybe even a kitchen upgrade, a bathroom upgrade, that kind of thing. We've also moved to, and we've introduced Fine and Country into this one. And the reason why we've introduced them is because the houses are pretty close to a main train station that goes into London. Fine and Country are very good at the London market. So for us, it was a case of, right, okay, let's help the developer out here. Let's give some advice. Look, go to these guys. Your marketing is going to be far more targeted rather than at the moment, which is the problem on Rightmove, is that unless you are searching in an area within a certain radius, it's very unlikely you're going to find it. So the problem with these ones as well is that they're on the outskirts of a town. And I don't know if anyone else does this when they use Rightmove, but I will search an area and then chances are I'll do +0 miles because I just want what's in that town. These you would have to do kind of +3 miles for them to come up. So that's obviously a big issue for them coming up on Rightmove. So more targeted marketing, that was a big one. And also moving to kind of staged completions. So trying to get it to the point where it's kind of all completing at a similar time, so that you haven't got people, for example, moving into one property, which is like an 800 grand property, moving into that and there's still being development going on around it. It's quite difficult to kind of justify that as move into essentially a site where there's still work on. It works when you're a first-time buyer, things like that. You take that hit, don't you? But not when you're buying kind of a 4-5 bed luxury property. The last thing we've done on that one as well is lined up an exit bridge as well. So that's reduced the interest that the client's paying, because the client was on development finance at circa 13%, so quite expensive. And we've moved them into an exit bridge, which works out about 9.6% per annum. So quite a significant saving on interest. Also stops them going into default or anything like that. So it's been quite nice to transition into that. And hopefully that'll kind of save the day a little bit there as well. So yeah, in terms of recent issues, they're kind of the 5 main ones that we're seeing. Each one has a solution, as you've kind of heard, but it really is a case of, and I've spoken about this on podcasts so much, is communication is key. So no matter what, communication with the broker, the lender, the team absolutely has to be time sensitive and time critical. Like, you have to be letting the broker know. Actually, I had an example of this the other day. A client had an issue on a deal, came to us one day before completion, one day before redemption, saying that I had an issue. I hadn't heard anything for the previous kind of 10 months. And it was a thing of, we need that comms early so that we can deal with stuff in a timely manner. So yeah, if any of these issues are starting to brew up, if you think suppliers are going bust, if you think the contractors sort of becoming an issue, if they're having cash flow problems, if maybe the planning's an issue, it really is a case of, right, communicate early, because we have a black book of thousands and thousands of contacts. And I think at last check it was about 9,000 contacts. So it's very rare that if someone comes to me and says, I need XYZ, that I'm not going to have a contact, especially in and around the Midlands as well, which is kind of where we do most of our business. We really do have a great pool of sort of professionals. So yeah, there are 5 issues, definitely not insurmountable by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, communication is absolutely key. So hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea that even if things do go wrong, and as you can see from those 5, things can go catastrophically wrong, there is still a solution out there for most scenarios. So like, share, subscribe, all of that good stuff for me. Let me know if you've enjoyed it. You can comment on Spotify. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, you can comment there as well. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. I'll catch you on the next one.